Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. As mystery swirls around the cause of the Azerbaijan Airlines crash, reports now blame Russia's defense system for the deadly incident in Kazakhstan, which killed 38 people. Syria's new authorities say supporters of ousted President Bashar al-Assad have killed 14 policemen in what has been described as an ambush in the west of the country. To the war in Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is being accused of sabotaging the ceasefire that would lead to the release of hostages. The Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan, killing 38 people, was downed by a Russian air defense system, according to a preliminary investigation. The Kremlin says it would be wrong to speculate before the end of the investigation into the cause of the crash. The passenger jet was en route from Azerbaijan's capital to the city of Grozny in Chechnya, but was diverted after several failed attempts to land due to heavy fog. For more on this, I'm joined by our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova, who is in Moscow for us this evening. Dasha, good evening to you. Russia is warning against hypotheses after the airline crash, but what has the prelim investigation revealed?
Well, indeed, what we understand Moscow is saying is that the final outcomes of this investigation have to be provided before any hypotheses with regards to what has caused this plane to crash are made. However, what we understand is at this stage there is no clarity and there are no versions as to what might have happened and what might have caused this plane to fall down. What we have heard from Russia's aviation authorities, Rosaviatsia, earlier was the very fact that this plane could have hit the birds and that could have resulted in the outcome we have seen. However, what we have heard from the Kazakh authorities was that this plane has attempted to land twice in the city of Aktau, but they were constantly changing chaotically the altitude at which they were flying. We also understand that the airport in Aktau has been ready to admit this passenger plane, but again, it was for some reason difficult for these crew to land this plane there. We also understand from the Kazakh authorities that there is so far no official version of what has happened and the expertises are being conducted. There are several ones. We're also hearing that the law enforcement agencies from both Russia and Azerbaijan will be allowed to see the results of these probe. And interestingly, there has been lots of speculation, obviously, with regards to the possibility of this plane being hit by the Russian air defense systems. With regard to that, we are looking at the timing. The timing has coincided with the drone attack against Russia's North Caucasus republics. And some of the aviation experts have been pointing to the fact that the plane has diverted. It has tried to, they say, land in Russia, but it couldn't because Russia is using several layers air defense system, which has electronic warfare, which jams the systems of a plane and the missiles that are being fired at the targets in the sky. So they suggest that the plane might have been experiencing some troubles with the command systems because of this electronic warfare before it has diverted to another side of the Caspian Sea to the Kazakhstan territory.
Dasha, as you explained there, we're waiting for those investigations to be carried out. But the Azerbaijani government officials made the claims around a Russian missile being responsible for the crash. We've heard that. Has Russia responded to any of these latest accusations at all?
Well, no response to this moment. Again, we are waiting for the official results of this investigation, and this is exactly what the Russian authorities will be looking for. But at the same time, if you read into what the political analysts here in Russia are saying, and they are saying now very clearly that at this stage, it does seem that the international community would be trying to put the blame on Russia because they say it will be yet another incident as MH17 or Bucha in which Russia will be blamed. and Russia will be saying that they are waiting for the results of the probe before making and drawing any sort of conclusions. And this is what political analysts here are saying is actually dangerous for the situation at this stage, because they say that the time is of essence, and we have been at the stage where the possibility of a negotiated settlement to the conflict in Ukraine has been in the air. There have been conversations about the possibility of ceasefire or the possibility of a meeting between Russia and the United States on this conflict with the arrival of the new US administration in January. So that could be also playing into the sequence of the events. But again, what Moscow has suggested to this moment is that the results of the investigation have to be provided, and we have heard that 2 black boxes have been recovered from the scene of the crash, and obviously the data from them will be shedding the light into what has happened.
Thank you so much. That's our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Earlier today, Baku Airport shared images of staff and passengers observing a minute's silence, with people laying flowers in memories of the 38 victims of the plane crash. Let's turn our focus to Syria now. Angry protests have erupted in the central city of Homs following a video showing an attack on the Alawite shrine. The video was later confirmed to be old by Syria's new Minister of Information. The minister reaffirmed the government's commitment to protecting all religious and historical sites and accused unnamed parties of attempting to stir internal strife in Syria. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad is out, but his loyalists do remain. Syria's new government has vowed to pursue the remnants of the ousted Bashar al-Assad regime, who are accused of an attack which killed 14 police officers yesterday. The violence in Tartus, home to many Assad supporters, marks the deadliest attack on the new authorities to date. Elsewhere, Al-Arabiya's camera did capture the moment military convoys from the new Syrian government entered Latakia, arriving from Idlib to restore security. Now, in northeast Syria, there were deadly clashes between the Syrian Democratic Forces and the armed factions backed by Turkey yesterday. The factions attacked advanced positions of the SDF, leading to the killing of about 30 people from both sides. Meanwhile, in the north of the country, both the SDF and the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army claim to be in control of the Tishrin Dam following heavy fighting over the past few days. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Omer Ozkizilcik, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Alawite communities have been protesting in several Syrian cities. What do we know about the reasons behind this recent unrest?
So what we have seen so far is that we can basically divide the protests into two. One, former regime supporters who have came out and to protest and to signal that they are still there, that they have still political might in Syria, and that they want to exercise some political power in the new Syria. And then we have the other ones who are people who gathered in response to the manipulated news or fake news, even in some cases, that are being widely spread. So because we see that some elements within the former Assad regime apparatus, especially close to Iran, are trying to incite hatred between the Sunnis and the Alawites in Syria, still continuing after the ousting of the Bashar Assad regime. And there are some incidents, as you have stated recently, but these protests are only one part of all the picture. There are also a second part of protests who came out in support of the new government in Syria, declaring unity for all Syrians and rejecting any kind of sectarian agenda. So there is an ongoing process. There will be some more turmoil because it's a changing movement. It will take some time to establish full stability and full security in Syria.
Do you think these protests show just how fragile the security situation is in the country at the moment? As you just alluded there, it's still very new. Things are still falling into place.
So what happened basically is Bashar Assad fled the country. With him, or parallel to him, many senior leaders fled, but many mid to upper level people from the Assad regime still remain in Syria, including several war criminals. We have seen today, for instance, that one of the torturers of the Setnaya prison and one other person who have recorded himself torturing civilians in Syria have been captured. And there are still ongoing security operations to capture and arrest these people because among the Syrians, there is a need for accountability. People want the criminals to be punished within the law. However, as the Assad regime said still remain, they put up a resistance. There are some sporadic clashes. They try to save their lives. They try to flee. They try to seek refuge and hide somewhere in the coastal regions, in the mountains of Syria. But in the end, when they are being found, and we see that many Alawites cooperate with the security officials, they put up resistance. Then we have some clashes. And today we had several incidents in which there were clashes. But in the end, either the wanted people were killed or they were arrested.
The former head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Mohsen Reza, today said the Syrian resistance will be revived in less than a year. Is this an indication of Iran's plans for Syria in the future?
Yes, definitely. As you have stated earlier, many of these protests that were organized, we know actually who these people are, while some watchers outside who did not follow Syria on a professional level, they may not know them. People who know Syria and have followed Syria professionally know that they had close relations with Iran. What we see is that not the pro-Russian, but the pro-Iranian elements of the Assad regime are still trying to incite some hatred, tries to gather up some demonstrations, some protests, have some clashes, fighting, some resistance. And this indicates, and we have seen, for instance, that an Iranian Shia cleric had called the people to behead anyone who is trying to enter the regions of the Alawites. So Iran has not accepted this huge defeat in Syria, this huge collapse of the Iranian so-called axis of resistance, is Shia crescent. And Iran has not accepted the reality. So therefore, Iran is trying to incite hatred, to incite violence in Syria, and to weaken the new government in Syria. However, that being said, I do not think that the Iranian efforts will be able to destabilize Syria in the long run. I expect that within the coming months and weeks even, more security and more stability will be established in Syria because everyone, including the Alawites in Syria, have enough. No one wants any more war in Syria. The people want peace. They want to live normal lives, and they want to rebuild their country.
Thank you so much, Omer Ozkizilcik, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Appreciate your insights. Let's turn to the Middle East. The ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas is still stalled, with both sides blaming each other for the delay. Hamas is claiming that Israel has added new conditions, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accuses the group of backing out of agreements. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accused by unnamed sources of sabotaging the Gaza peace talks after reiterating his demand for the war to continue until Hamas is completely removed. The sources claim that it is hardline comments like these from Netanyahu and his defense minister that are delaying the ceasefire deal for hostage release. Israel's opposition leader is also weighing in, stating that Netanyahu is blocking the deal for political reasons. He added that whenever progress is made on the deal, Netanyahu speaks to foreign media, declaring that he won't stop the war. This comes as Defense Minister Israel Katz visited the Philadelphia corridor while wearing a bulletproof vest, stating that security in the corridor and throughout Gaza will remain under IDF control.
Security will remain in the hands of the IDF, which will be able to act in any way necessary to eliminate threats, prevent tunneling, disrupt terror infrastructure, and thwart terrorist organizations attempting to harm Israel or IDF soldiers. We will ensure that what we have seen regarding cross-border tunnels and other threats will not recur. We will ensure that security control remains in the hands of the IDF, which will act to eliminate threats.
Israel has launched a multi-wave attack across Yemen. The Israeli warplanes hit Sana'a International Airport, which is controlled by the Houthis. Sources in Yemen also reported strikes on the port city of Hudaydah and other energy facilities. Meanwhile, Al-Arabiya news sources have confirmed that Israel targeted Houthi headquarters in Sana'a. Israeli media reported that Tel Aviv informed Washington of the attack. For more on this, our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Trent Murray, joins us now. Trent, thanks for joining us. Israel has hit Houthi militants and infrastructure today. Can you share more details about the scale of the operation and what Israeli warplanes have targeted?
Yeah, that's right. They very quickly acknowledged that it was indeed IDF planes that hit those targets, putting out a fairly lengthy statement explaining that they were targeting what they said was Houthi infrastructure. Now, we know that Sana'a International Airport in the capital there was targeted. We also know energy facilities were targeted, as well as several key ports, including the main one of Hudaydah. Now, what the Israelis are saying is that they were targeting those particularly transport links because they say that Iran is using them to smuggle weapons into Yemen, including ballistic missiles, which the Houthi themselves have been firing towards Israel in fairly large numbers, I have to say, in recent days, which is why we had been expecting a fairly large-scale response was coming, and we certainly saw it today. We understand 3 people were killed, according to Houthi media, 17 injured, and also a very high-profile person happened to be at Sana'a International Airport when they struck. It was the Director General of the World Health Organization, of course, the UN's health body. He has tweeted that he is safe, but one member of his team was injured.
Defense Minister Israel Katz says that security in the Philadelphia corridor will remain in IDF hands. What is the significance of this area? And we're just switching focus here.
Well, it's a key crossing point between Gaza and Egypt. And so if the IDF continues to maintain control of the Philadelphia corridor, then what it effectively means is that the Palestinians in Gaza are cut off from any sort of access into the Egyptian side of their four-sided enclave. So it is significant. No surprise, I think, that Israel Katz has said that, because consistently the government here has been saying that they will maintain security in Gaza moving forward, even if there is a ceasefire agreement. I mean, we should note that Egypt does maintain that border on its side, but it is also heavily restricted, just like on the Israeli side. So I think a pretty significant show of strength, or a perceived show of strength, really, from the Israeli government sending the defence minister down there. But it will, I think, cause some concern, particularly in Egypt, that the IDF is maintaining this strong line, that they are going to maintain control of that key border crossing that separates Gaza and Egypt.
Trent, let's talk a little bit about these ceasefire negotiations that have been going on for a large amount of time in the background, in the shadow of this war. How is Benjamin Netanyahu's narrative playing into stalling any ceasefire agreements? He is saying that Hamas is changing the goalposts, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's really difficult to get a sense of where the ceasefire negotiations are at, because there is a lot of, I think, information warfare at play here. Both sides accusing the other of breaching the trust and putting in new conditions and whatnot into the negotiations. I mean, we do know that both sides are also, though, under pressure in their own ways. Hamas is under significant pressure, given the strong attacks by the Israeli army, but the Netanyahu government is also under pressure. You know, there's still around 100 Israelis that are being held in Gaza as hostages. And of course, his government here is under a lot of pressure from families to get them home. So I think there is a desire, certainly on both sides, to potentially get a ceasefire here for their own respective reasons. But exactly how you get there is tricky, because it's very, very detailed. This is very high-stakes stuff. And, you know, it's often a bit of a game of smoke and mirrors, I think. There seems to be moments where there is some excitement that maybe a ceasefire is coming, and then, you know, in the hours and days later, we learn it's all collapsed again. So very, very difficult. I imagine the return of President Trump to the White House, though, may have a pretty significant impact on the ground, just given how unorthodox and unpredictable he can be when it comes to Middle East policy.
Trent Murray in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Short break now, but when we're back, we'll take a look at how Christmas was celebrated around the world this year. And President Trump adds another nominee to his team, an ambassador to Panama, where he threatened to take back the canal.
At Al-Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al-Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Let's turn to the US now, where President-elect Donald Trump has announced his pick for American ambassador to Panama, Cuban-born Commissioner Kevin Cabrera. This decision comes just days after Trump suggested that the United States should take control of the country's canal. Our correspondent Benji Haya from Washington has this report.
Pictured here on the right is Kevin Cabrera, the man Donald Trump wants on the ground in Panama, standing alongside his potential new boss. In announcing his selection, the president-elect said that few understand Latin American politics as well as Kevin, claiming the Central American nation is ripping off the United States. That allegation has been at the heart of Trump's narrative this week.
Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else. A secure... He just said, take it back. That's a good idea.
He's talking about this, the major waterway cutting through the American continent, allowing the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans to converge. A huge transportation route for military and commercial vessels the world over. It was built by the US back in the early 1900s, but was handed over to Panama 25 years ago. Since then, fees to access the canal have risen, and it's increasingly being used by China.
But it's falling into the wrong hands. It was not given for the benefit of others by a token of cooperation, but it was given to Panama and to the people of Panama, but it has provisions. You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly and without question.
Panama has hit back. Its president insists every metre of the canal belongs to his country. Its sovereignty and independence, he says, are non-negotiable. Neither is Greenland. The Prime Minister of the world's biggest island has told Donald Trump that the Danish territory is not for sale either, following the US President-elect's suggestion that he'd try to buy it for national security purposes. Trump isn't even in office yet, but these foreign policy feuds are already keeping Cabrera and co busy as America braces for another unconventional presidency. Benji Haya, Al-Arabiya News, Washington.
In Trump's Christmas speech on social media, he once again slammed Panama on its operation of the canal, claiming that Chinese soldiers are illegally operating the waterway that the US built and also funded. Trump then floated the idea of adding Canada as the 51st US state, while criticizing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his high taxes. He also touched upon Greenland, which in his previous term he threatened to buy, and addressing its national security need for the US. Speaking of Christmas, we've seen how President-elect Donald Trump celebrates. He's been asking Santa Claus for the Panama Canal, Canada and Greenland. But now let's take a look at how Christmas was celebrated around other parts of the world this year. Let's begin in East Africa. Festivities are in full swing in Tanzania, where over 60% of the population identifies as Christian. In cities like Dar es Salaam, Christmas is marked by celebrations, church services and family gatherings. Al-Arabiya's Isaac Lukmando reports from the commercial capital.
How do Tanzanians celebrate Christmas? Because of the religious and cultural harmony, festivities in this neck of the woods are not reserved for just a section of the country's 62 million people. Families get together because it's a communal affair. They eat together, they play, and they exchange gifts. Many Christians go to church, while others choose to engage in acts of charity. Some donate food, clothing, or gifts to those in need. A 2020 survey found that 63% of Tanzania's population identifies as Christian. But Swahili culture, which unites Tanzanians and East Africans, has Arab, Persian, and Indian influences. Therefore, on Christmas Day, many people have things like pilau, which is spiced rice, grilled meat, and chapati, just to name a few. And like many other places in Africa, there is music and dance, with musical performances and festivities staged. But for others, it's a time to reflect, to take stock of one's year. It's a time to strategize on how to elevate incomes at personal and national level, to augment the overall well-being of the nation. Isaac Lukando, Al-Arabiya News, Dar es Salaam.
Now over to Asia. While Christmas is not an official holiday in mainland China, that is not the case across the border in Hong Kong, where the Christian minority, along with many tourists, are embracing the holiday spirit. Our correspondent Laura Westbrook reports.
In his annual Christmas message, the head of the Catholic Diocese of Hong Kong, Cardinal Chow, pointed to challenges facing Hong Kong and the world, including the slower than expected economic recovery, worsening geopolitics, and rising mental health problems among the youth and elderly. But he urged the city's 400,000 faithful to embrace the hope that Christmas brings. He also expressed a commitment to supporting marginalized communities who often feel unwanted and abandoned, including prisoners and young people. He added that justice is better not sought through vengeance, but through empathy. Here in Hong Kong, Christmas is a public holiday. Around 16% of the population are Christians, and churches across the city will host services. Across the border in mainland China, Christmas is not an official holiday. Around 5% of the population are Christians. Buddhism and Taoism are the major religions. Hong Kong's festive atmosphere is one of the draws of tourists, particularly those from the mainland. Some mainland tourists are choosing Hong Kong to immerse themselves in the city's holiday vibe. Government data estimates that there will be around 13 million trips made to the city during the Christmas and New Year period. The city is putting on a number of events, including a Christmas town, which has a 20-meter tall Christmas tree, and Christmas markets to draw in crowds. Hong Kong's famous skyline also transforms for the season, with Christmas-themed light displays illuminating skyscrapers. Laura Westbrook for Al Arabiya News, Hong Kong.
Now to a reminder of our top stories today. As mystery swirls around the cause of the Azerbaijan Airlines crash, reports now blame Russia's defense system for the deadly incident in Kazakhstan, which killed 38 people. Syria's new authorities say supporters of ousted President Bashar al-Assad have killed 14 people in what has been described as an ambush in the west of the country. To the war in Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is being accused of sabotaging the ceasefire that would lead to the release of hostages. That's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. Riz Khan is coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night and thank you once again.